And okay. This is my Sansui 1000A, a stereo tube amplifier slash tuner that was produced in the late 1960s. It uses a Class AB design and produces 40 watts per channel into 8 ohms. And there's lots of really interesting features about this amplifier, and I want to get into those, but first I have to show you the type of work I had to do to get a device like this working. It's really old, and these old devices need a lot of work and a lot of repairs and a lot of little pieces to get them running again. And I guess I'll get into that now. This Sansui looks nice, but when I first got it, it looked like this. It's a bit dirty and grimy, and so I need to clean it. These Sansuis were sold with brown top covers, but a lot of people, including me, removed them to help improve ventilation. Removing the top cover shows us the tubes, and there are a bunch of them. This middle section consists of the preamplifier and radio section, and the rear of the unit shows us the 7591 tubes. In order to clean the unit fully, I need to remove all the tubes, and they aren't going back in. These tubes are pretty worn down, and from what I've read online, Japanese-made tubes were not as good as Western-made tubes, and I'll show you later on what I plan to replace them with. Only one of the tubes gave me trouble, and it's this one here in the shield. These 3 tubes are also for the radio, and I think this middle plate is here to act as a shield also. The faceplate needs to be removed next, which requires all the knobs to be removed. I noticed while taking this guy apart that some of the screws were a bit stripped, and something I've learned over the years is that when you see stripped screws like this, it means that someone has been in here. Oftentimes it's because they used the wrong screwdriver, and by extension it's likely they didn't know what they were doing. Fortunately, I don't think that's the case here. It looks pretty good overall. The tuner glass has a rubber strip on either end, and after decades, this rubber strip has turned into tar. This thing is pretty dusty. The dust is a lot more brown than what I'm used to seeing, and this type of dust is more often seen from equipment stored in a barn or a shed, but I don't think this guy was stored in a barn, maybe an attic. Other than a few crooked knobs on the front and a busted bottom panel, the unit is really clean inside and says to me that it was well taken care of. Cleaning the unit shows us that there is quite a bit of patina, corrosion, and minor rust spots on the chassis, and this is common on all equipment from this era. American companies often use cadmium to coat their chassis, and Macintosh in particular used stainless steel to prevent environmental corrosion. But I think this Sansui just used normal steel. It looks like galvanized steel to me. The bottom panel is really beaten up, and by removing it, it shows us all the electronics, and it's a bit complicated. All those gray cylinders you see need to be replaced. The larger ones are Elna electrolytic caps, and the smaller ones are Suzuki oil caps. Suzuki oil capacitors do this thing when they go bad, where they pop like a firecracker. This is obviously undesirable, and you shouldn't power up a unit like this if they haven't been replaced. I used film caps wherever possible, but had to settle for a few electrolytic caps in some areas. This corner section has a few diodes and a safety capacitor by the mains voltage that need to be replaced too. The phono preamp is housed on a primitive daughter board and uses 4 germanium transistors. These transistors have no modern substitute, and so if yours fail or start to hum or hiss, there isn't much you can do. I use Nichicon KA electrolytic capacitors in this circuit. With the recap done, and a few other things I'll get to in a moment, comes the fun part of installing the new tubes. Vacuum tubes are fortunately still made today, but the selection is limited to only the most popular kinds. 7591s are not used much today in modern tube designs and are only really used on vintage Class AB amps like this one, and so only a few companies make them. The only other tubes that can be bought new are 12AX7s and 12AU7s. Every other tube is no longer manufactured and needs to be sourced from somewhere. Some of these tubes cost more than others, but are generally dirt cheap because nobody really wants them. I didn't video much of it, but most of the tube sockets were replaced too. You can see that the original brown ones were replaced with Belton tube sockets. I used their special gold-plated ones for their audio tubes. not that it makes much of a difference. Jumping ahead a bit in time shows us the Sansui, fully restored. Zooming in shows us the power tubes operating in the back, and turning it around shows us the Nuvistor tuner tubes. Nuvistors are a special miniature vacuum tube and are pretty neat, and these two things would have been the highlight electronic features of this device. The front panel shows us a wide range of switches and knobs. The power button is exactly what it sounds like and does what it's supposed to. The switch above it is a speaker selector and simply disables the speaker for listening with headphones. The next section is dedicated to the tone controls, and there are quite a few different options. All four of these knobs feel a little bit different as a result of age and the liquid deoxidizer required for cleaning. The deoxidizer loosens the dampening grease if used too liberally, and you have to be careful not to go too overboard. What is a novelty today is an essential feature on an amplifier like this one. Independent left-right bass and treble controls allow you to set each channel to play music a little bit differently. Early media formats, like vinyl records, had really bad quality control and frequently had imbalanced channels, to which these knobs solved the problem. The first switch is a bit of a weird one. It's basically a sound better mode and operates similarly to a bass boost button on a more modern device. The low and high filters operate as high pass and low pass filters respectively. The former helps with subsonic frequencies from vinyl records and such, while the latter helps with, I'm not sure exactly. I guess it's nice to have, but there is a reason this isn't a common feature. Loudness helps improve bass when listening to music at low volumes, or if you have a small set of speakers and need to get a little bit more bass out of them. There are a lot of sound modes, but what is odd about it is the way they are positioned on the knob. Stereo Normal, the mode you'll be using 99% of the time, is positioned all the way to the left, while the topmost center position is for mono right. I don't know why they did this, it doesn't make any sense, and it's aesthetically incorrect. The band selector changes FM and AM modes. AM broad and sharp enable you to fine-tune AM receiving, but aren't used much today unless you like to listen to religious nutjobs. The best mode, FM stereo, is positioned topmost and makes sense to be there, but you won't be using it too much because analog tuners cannot effectively decode digital stereo FM signals. The next knob is the input selector and is also a bit weird. The mic input is RCA and can only be used with select dynamic microphones. The tape head input is designed to operate as a preamplifier for very specific audio tape players that did not have their own built-in preamplifier. This is a photo of my non-functioning Ampex 350, and do note the separate electronic units. Phono 1 was designed to be used with ceramic phono cartridges, which have been obsolete for decades. However, with the addition of an impossible-to-find optional accessory, you can actually use this input with moving coil cartridges with an output of less than 2 mV. Phono 2 is usable and works with any phono cartridge that outputs more than 2 mV. Tuner is self-explanatory, and you get a single aux input too. Except on the rear of the unit, you actually get 2 pairs of RCA inputs, but only one pair can be used at one time because the other one gets muted, which is a really odd design choice as well. The tape monitor switch enables you to connect a relatively more modern tape recorder to this device and record your own music or playback previously recorded music. To help reduce obnoxious static, muting mutes the audio signal when tuning into radio stations. And tuning FM AFC is an odd one which prevents frequency drift. The final knob is the tuning dial and is not very impressive. The original shaft on this dial was crooked and I had to modify one from an organ donor to fit this Sansui. The new shaft is more narrow and so it does wobble a bit, but isn't crooked anymore, and to me it's a fair trade. There is a tiny little meter in the corner which shows the signal strength. The paint on the needle dial is flaking a bit, but is more trouble than it's worth to repaint it. You can only really see it with a macro lens anyway.
Wow, it's you, the Capital One Bank guy. He's broken away. Now the
and the back shows us more work that I did to this device. The original RCA jacks are flared and don't work well with modern RCA connectors. I broke the original RCA plate when trying to install them, so I had to 3D print a new one. And I figured since I was here, I may as well replace the speaker connectors too. The banana plugs are a nice upgrade, but are a little bit too close to each other and perhaps a bit dangerous with them being bare metal. This extra RCA next to them is an output for a 3rd channel mono satellite amplifier. The impedance switch only enables 8 or 16 ohm operation. 16 ohm speakers were supposedly common at the time, but it's even more strange that there is not a 4 ohm switch when other contemporary amplifiers did. A popular modification suggests that the original crusty power resistors should be removed and replaced. There isn't a modern equivalent, so the forum guide suggests that you use several chassis mount resistors wired in parallel to achieve the same values. There isn't enough space in this spot for all of them to fit, however, and the most popular strategy suggests that they be placed on the rear of the front panel. This requires a bit of labor to do correctly, and the video we're watching now is cut down significantly. The original placement of the wires in this online guide are positioned on the underside of this unit, but from my experience this is not a good idea. Even with 14 gauge wire, the proximity to the sensitive preamplifier section creates a bit of hum, and so I decided to rewire it to emerge from a small opening by the tuner PCB and route it above the unit, and this solved the problem for me completely. If you happen to come across this amplifier and perform this modification, it's critical to understand that touching this circuit while the device is powered on will probably kill you. I had plans to make a nice wooden case for this amplifier, but they didn't quite happen in time for this video, and so the new resistors are exposed and a tiny bit dangerous. The rear side of this device is rather dull, or at least it is until you turn off the lights. It's hard to show on camera, but it really does look lovely in person. That pretty much concludes this video. If you liked it, you can feel free to like it, and perhaps subscribe for more. My main channel is on the screen now, which is a place I spend most of my time making videos for. Or at least that's what I plan to do, as both this channel and the other one are still quite new, and I don't have much of a back catalog yet. That's all for now. Thank you for watching.